Nelson Wiseman, first of all, good to see you again. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
What do you think will happen when Tom Mulcair faces the delegates in Edmonton this weekend?
I think he's going to get reaffirmed as leader. Of course, the question is by what margin? And I suspect the margin will be high enough, but I am wrong 70% of the time.
So, well, it's interesting you say that, since 70% is the number everybody thinks he needs to reach. How significant do you think that threshold of 70% support that people say Tom Mulcair needs to get, how significant do you think that is?
Well, let me say something about the 70%. The first person who floated this was the president of the party, Miss Blakey.
Right.
And I think that it was totally inappropriate. Her job is to carry out the functions of the party according to the Constitution. Constitution says, yes, there will be a vote on whether there should be a leadership. And if you don't meet 50%, there's got to be a convention on a new leader. I don't think it's for the president to speculate on what that level of support should be. I can understand why the media ask it, and I think it's a perfectly proper question for pundits, for academics, among the media themselves. But I don't think that's really for the president of the party to talk about. Having said all of that, I think he will receive over 70%.
Okay. I mean, a big question, I suppose, if he doesn't, and the question the delegates have to consider there is, who would replace Tom Mulcair if he doesn't get the level of support that he needs from delegates? What are the consequences for the NDP of dumping Tom Mulcair now?
Well, we're not going to have another election for 3.5 years. And the party might take a year to select the leader. Then the question would come up, is that leader going to be someone who's currently in Parliament or not? Because if you're a leader outside of Parliament, the dynamic is very different. Those are the kinds of issues that'll come up. Plus, of course, there will be this policy debate at the convention. And one of the differences between the NDP and the other two parties is that under the NDP's constitution, the policies of the party in Parliament are the policies of the party as worked out at conventions like this one, whereas the Liberals and Conservatives defer to their leaders.
Why?
I mean, I don't recall a Liberal convention agreeing that they would run a deficit, yet the Liberals unfolded that during the campaign. And, they won. I'm not being critical. I am being critical from the point of view of party democracy.
Right. I mean, certainly some New Democrat, you talk about the balanced budget, the deficit debate that took place during the campaign, and we know which side the New Democrats came down on. Some of the party delegates, they've made it clear they'll be blasting Tom Mulcair's leadership when they debate what went wrong in the election campaign. That will happen at the convention Friday night. Why do you think the NDP campaign faltered after riding so high in the polls as the campaign started?
The support for the NDP is directly related to the support of the Liberal Party. The question I raise isn't why the NDP faltered. Actually, its performance was, I think, the second highest in its history in terms of popular vote. The question for me is, why was the NDP leading or tied for the lead going into the election campaign? And I associate this with two factors. One is they got an immediate bounce from the NDP winning in Alberta. And many people in the rest of the country thought, gee, if the most conservative province in the country can swing to the NDP, maybe the NDP aren't such a radical bunch after all. The second factor is that the Conservatives had a huge war chest. They couldn't spend it all during the election campaign. So they put out a lot of money on advertising before the campaign even started. And their ads were compelling, that Justin Trudeau just wasn't ready. During the campaign period itself, Trudeau demonstrated that he could stand on the stage with the other two. I thought Harper performed very well, but Mulcair had said before we went into the campaign that he was going to mop the floor with Trudeau in the debates. That didn't quite happen. Trudeau did hold his own. And I thought they all held their own, although Mulcair ended up coming across the least full of luster in a way, because he was running a front-runners campaign. That's how they started.
Let's talk about, I mean, clearly the leadership issue is one thing, but there's also a directional issue. What does the NDP want to be? I mean, some people are talking about the need to have this wholehearted look at what the NDP stands for because of their performance in the election. Do you think they need a big rethink of what they are, with a lot of people asking, why does the country need the NDP on the progressive side of the political spectrum if they've got the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau doing some of the things New Democrats want done, and we know that a whole lot of New Democrats supported the Liberals in the campaign?
The reason is because the Liberals are ideological chameleons. If you recall, they came in 1993 on a left-wing program, and then within 2 years we had the biggest cuts from federal transfers to the provinces in Canadian history. So the Liberals, of course, had to undercut the NDP to get elected, so they were competing for the same space, voter space. Once in power, we'll see how the Liberals behave in 2-3 years from now. What if commodity prices remain low and the deficit isn't $30 billion a year? It starts rising to $50 billion a year. Are the Liberals going to keep on that track? Would it be successful in the coming election? Now, we don't know how the economy is going to turn out, but I'm fairly confident that the Liberals, who promised they were going to balance the budget by the last year in power, they're even backing away from that now, and we still aren't going to have an election for 3.5 years. So the NDP was put in a box, and the policy of running a balanced budget wasn't anything new.
Right.
In fact, had the NDP started the campaign by saying we're going to run a deficit, I think they would have actually done worse than they did. There were other reasons that the NDP lost, and they didn't lose on the basis of policy. They lost because of the performance of the Liberal Party, the Liberal leader.
Okay.
And a specific dynamic in Quebec.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about one of the key issues we think we'll hear around the convention floor. Not sure to what extent it'll be debated at the convention, and that's the whole conversation around the LEAP Manifesto. As you know, it has the backing of artists and activists and politicians. Zero carbon economy, no pipelines, economic and racial and gender equality, respect for Indigenous rights, no trade deals that damage local economies. Is that the kind of thing the NDP needs to look at if it's going to get back in the electoral game in the next election? Or what do you think the appetite is for New Democrats, A, to move that way, but B, for voters to think that's an interesting policy to see in the window?
Well, from the things you mentioned, that sounds like NDP policy now. I mean, the party's for equality. I think the party's been in the lead on Aboriginal issues. I didn't catch quite all of the others, but as you ran through them, I thought, does party policy contradict that? I think the difference would be is that in this manifesto, they would just like the party to be more explicit and more aggressive about it, but I'm not sure the line that the party had in the last election was really any different. Having said all of that, I'd like to point out that at every NDP convention, and they're held biennially, once every 2 years, you get a manifesto from a socialist caucus, a left caucus. Now, I don't know what this manifesto, we had the Waffle Manifesto. At the end of the day, those people end up voting for the NDP. And so, you know, they're the yeast in the party, just as the youth wing is in the Liberal Party. And so, and for many of them, electoral politics is not as important as education, changing the consciousness of Canadians. Well, those are two different approaches. But this NDP, and I think most members, and this is why I think Tom Mulcairs will get reaffirmed with over 70%, they want to win power.
Okay. Lots to watch for, lots to consider in your comments, as always, Nelson Wiseman. Good to speak with you again. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.